the kind of place I've always imagined.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
All right, everybody. My name is Kevin.
And I'm Joe.
My name is Adam.
And I'm Julie.
And we are the Real Movie Guys. It's May, ladies and gentlemen, so it's time for Real Anime. Real Anime is a special event where we take a look at some of your favorite anime films all month long. This month, we're taking a look at Ghibli films specifically, and today, we're going to be reviewing Kiki's Delivery Service. A young witch on her mandatory year of independent life finds fitting into a new community difficult while she supports herself by running an air courier service. All right, guys, we're coming off a bit of a high here. I think we can all agree. My Neighbor Totoro, for the most of us here, except John, we thought it was like a perfect 10 kind of movie. Now we're stepping into something new with Kiki's Delivery Service. I do really like this movie. This is one of the ones that I think stands out, especially in the fandom of like the Ghibli films, where I think a lot of people, even more so recently, I think within the past, like say 4 or 5 years, have kind of appreciated this film just a little bit more. Let's start with Julie. Now, Julie, I know for a while this was one of your favorite movies. This is one I know you always went back to. What do you think of Kiki's Delivery Service?
It's still definitely one of my favorites. For a while, I was thinking that it was my absolute favorite Ghibli movie. I think during the course of this rewatch, I don't know if I had rose-colored glasses initially, but I definitely saw a couple like flaws, and they're definitely nitpicks this time around. But I do love this movie. It's another cozy movie from Studio Ghibli. I love the witch element. I love Kiki. I love Chi-Chi. I love all of the characters, really. So another really enjoyable Studio Ghibli movie.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I think it does something a little more with the storytelling than it did from Totoro, which we will talk about when we get to it. Adam, how about you? What do you think of Kiki's Delivery Service?
It's definitely been longer since I've seen this one, so it was nice to go back and watch it again. But yeah, I this is a good movie too. I really do like this one. It's got a very more, I guess, more of a fleshed out story than Totoro, which is good. I think that it worked for this movie.
Yeah, I think so. I think Kiki is more of a fleshed out character, which is something, we will talk about. And again, it's just a very interesting take from Miyazaki that I don't know if we would have gotten more so here within the Western culture. So I think that's very interesting as well, too. John, the last one over there. What do you think about Kiki's over there?
This movie was very interesting. It was like and I kind of got confused halfway through this movie. I'm gonna be honest.
All right. So let's talk about it. What happened?
Movies where so much shit going on. I was kind of confused, and then I was like, "Do I really know what's going on?" And there was one character in this whole movie that really bothered me. Just couldn't.
All right, who bothered you? Who was it? Who hurt you?
It was that stupid black cat. His voice was so annoying.
Oh no!
How dare you!
I think we just lost any viewer retention that we had with this video. Is absolutely gone.
Now we're gonna hit 1 million now.
Oh my god!
All those angry people coming out.
Oh man! Well, there's a lot to talk.
It's one of the best parts.
Yeah. I gotta disagree with you big time, man. So before we even get into the whole discussion about the movie, I guess we should address some of the dubbing things that kind of happened with this movie. So this was in a weird phase, this movie, where it was dubbed a couple times. The dub that we watched was the Disney dubbed version, which is probably the most common version that you would be able to, obtain now. Kirsten Dunst does the voice of Kiki, which I think she does a really good job actually as Kiki. And Phil Hartman does Gigi's voice, which except John apparently over here. I thought he did a phenomenal job, playing off Kiki really extremely well.
I do want to point out, and maybe it was just me, I felt like over the course of the movie, he was called Gigi and Chi-Chi. Like multiple times. Like I feel like they went back and forth between like calling him different things.
It might just be like the pronunciation, I think, in the movie. I wouldn't say
maybe like sometimes Kiki called him Gigi, and then other times he was referenced as like Chi-Chi. So I was like very confused.
Yeah, I think it was more Gigi. I probably is just like a pronunciation thing. But there is. I mean, this is also another problem with this movie where the dub isn't perfect in this movie to the point where Kiki's audio is very distorted at times, and you can actually hear it like reverberating, like she's talking through a fan throughout the movie. And I guess what happened essentially was they were trying to restore. Phil Hartman did an original take on this movie, which could have been made. It sounds like that's the one John watched, where people weren't too happy with some of the line delivery that he was giving. He was kind of changing like the meaning of some of like the sublines and the original content. So they went back, redubbed that. But unfortunately, when they went to redub the movie, some of Kirsten Dunst's audio got kind of scrambled and lost and distorted. So unfortunately, it's not terrible. It's definitely a watchable movie. And unless you have it like really turned up or in a surround sound system, I don't know how much it's going to bother you. I just noticed it throughout the movie. So there is something there as far as the audio, but the version that we have now as far as dubbed, I think is fantastic. Sorry, John. I think you're wrong on this one. I'm not going to back you up a little bit there. Phil Hartman, I think, really is able to bounce off Kiki. And this movie really is Kiki's journey. And that's kind of what I want to talk about with you guys here. I really, really love this story of a witch going to be set on her own, where it's kind of like that fantastical Miyazaki element that we've seen, but he's taken that fantastical element and made it relatable almost, right? Where it's almost as if someone, they're kind of going out and making their mark on their own in real life. And it's a coming of age story for Kiki and seeing her interacting with different people along the way. It's not a super hardcore plot. There's not really too much story beyond that basic, storytelling right there. But I think it's really well done. And I think the emotional beats are very, very effective in this movie, especially in Kiki have to pretty much survive on her own. Adam, what did you think of this adaptation of the story? Did you like it? I know you said you did enjoy it. What do you think of that story that they went with here?
Once again, I mean, it's another unique story that I would only expect to happen from Studio Ghibli. I mean, the same thing with all the other movies. It's, I mean, like I said with the My Neighbor Totoro review, it just feels like it's separate. Like it tackles so many issues that I wouldn't expect like a studio like Disney to tackle.
Right, and I think so. And I think it does relate to a lot of, especially a lot of young girls, I think it can relate to. And not so much where it's like the princess, the girl becoming the princess and living happily ever after, but it's like a more grounded story. And again, it's not something, this came out in 1989, so only a year after My Neighbor Totoro. We were still getting those kind of fantastical Disney movies like, the Cinderellas and the Beauty and the Beast and the stories like that. This is very different from that kind of story about a girl. If you want to make the argument for a strong female protagonist, I think this is the movie. We don't get many of those in story where we're told how strong they are, but we get to see how Kiki grows up and becomes stronger throughout the film. What did you think of that, Julie? Did you like the way they kind of told the story of Kiki here?
Yeah, I love. She really went on like a really beautiful journey where, we see her in the beginning and she's very confident mostly and headstrong. And then, she leaves home. She's adamant about leaving home. Her parents keep trying to delay it a little bit. Then you see that confidence start to falter a little bit. She finds herself in, a big city comparatively from where she's from. And, for the most part, she's lucky where she does meet a lot of supportive people along the way, but she also does come across some people that are very, rude and, antagonistic towards her. And then seeing kind of the highs and lows as she starts to break out on her own, where I'm going to start this delivery service, and her first trip out, she gets chased by a flock of crows and loses the toy she's supposed to deliver, or gets caught in the rain. And then not only that, having to balance kind of, which is unusual to see from a kid's perspective, but I feel like she has that work-life balance that she has to kind of deal with at some point where, she has Tombo who she wants to hang out with, but she also has her responsibilities to deliver things on time, and then there's that sacrifice there that she, has to kind of navigate.
Yeah, it's just a very, again, that slice of life that I think we're really coming to love from Studio Ghibli and how Miyazaki does so well. And then giving these characters just like these modern things that we've, come across into. Like you said, she wants to go on a date, but she has to go to work and somehow find a balance between those two. And then, she finally gets home, but she was in the rain and she gets sick. And that was one of the more like interesting scenes too, where she's very vulnerable and very, she has a fever and she doesn't feel well, but she just so happened, she's living with this family that kind of cares for her as like a surrogate daughter almost. I think that's just really good storytelling right there. It shows just kind of the positivity in humanity. Like, yeah, there's some things where Kiki gets into a little bit of trouble early on. She almost causes like a car accident and the cops are kind of after her, which I thought that was kind of funny for whatever reason. But I like that. You know what I mean? Miyazaki, I think, likes to focus on the positive sides of humanity. We don't see too much of the negativity, and it really stands out in this movie. John, I want to talk to you specifically about this one. So far from Miyazaki, you know, I think My Neighbor Totoro felt Japanese adjacent almost, right? Like there were still some like Japanese kind of storytelling elements, like the setting, kind of like some of the story and lore. This movie doesn't feel very Japanese. Would you agree with that? Because if you didn't tell me it was an anime, I might not have necessarily have known that.
Yeah, no, wouldn't think that this would be more to the like, Japanese culture. I feel like this could relate to anyone. And it's also very interesting how it seems like these movies from Studio Ghibli have a lot of strong women characters to it.
Yeah,
it's a very big thing, it seems like, in these movies. For these women to seem empowered and strong and not show, but even in this shows like the little weakness, but you see she overcomes everything.
Yeah, I like how he does that. I mean, again, Miyazaki, and we're going to see that continue on. Most of his leads are female characters for the most part, or contain a very strong female character. And the story kind of centers almost around that character. And again, he's very empowering that way. And I really do appreciate the kind of storytelling he's doing here. One thing to also, I think is interesting too, where we talk about Miyazaki kind of wanting to kind of hide the darker aspects of history and the darker aspects of the world. The world that this movie's contained in, there was no World War at this point. This was post, you know, anything that would have happened, like as if World War I, World War II, none of that ever happened in this universe, which is an interesting distinction to make, because Miyazaki, again, really wanted to focus on what would happen if we didn't have a world war and everyone kind of got along and we had this life together. I think that's really interesting of the story he's trying to tell here. It may be slightly revisionist, but I don't think it's a bad revision in a way where he wants to kind of put that stuff to the side. You know, he's not so much concerned with that happened in history. He's more concerned with telling, you know, some of these brighter aspects and capturing a really this lighthearted, fantastic character. Again, this is also a stark contrast to what we've seen from Miyazaki. His last film, he focused very much so on his animation as far as like the terrain and, you know, the countryside. It was nice to see his like detailed drawings of a city. And I think that was really, really well done. There's a lot of height differences within the buildings, a lot of depth. And Adam, what did you think of like the animation in this movie? Because I felt like it was a step up even from Totoro, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, it's so nice to see, like, especially with the further movies that are coming, up in our reviews. But like even with this one, it was just the set pieces were just so nice to look at, and just very like all the colors, and especially when she was flying at nighttime, and all the blues with the blacks, it's just so nice and very appealing.
Right, and I think you really capture the sense of flight in this movie, which a lot of animated movies I feel like would
Absolutely.
have a harder time. We would see, Aladdin kind of go on to try and do that with the magic carpet as far as like the Western audiences where we'd see something flying in the air. I think I'd make the argument Kiki did it a little bit better than Aladdin to some extent, where it really does feel like this sense of height and drama to everything when she's in the air. Like Julie said, when she's fighting with the crows in the air, and she could fall at any moment and things are flying through the air. The animation style is just very, very rapid, but peaceful at the same time. And I think you need to find that balance, which Miyazaki was able to do.
Yeah, and like you're saying too, there's like contrast between, her different experiences flying. Sometimes it's just a peaceful little, night ride, and other times she's trying to save, the blimp that's falling through the sky. And I really like the attention to detail with like the wind, like how the wind's blowing through characters' hair or moving around characters. I thought that was a nice added touch.
Yeah, I think so too. And now one other thing I think, and John, I'll talk to you a little bit about this one. There's a lot that's not said in this movie, and it's not something I think I realized maybe on my older viewings of this movie, but watching it now, I really like some of the silent moments that we get in this movie with Kiki, where she's actually not saying anything. Miyazaki and I don't know if you agree with this, John, he's really able to portray a character's emotions just through facial reactions and through how the camera catches things. One example I really like is when Kiki finally delivers I think it's like a fish pie or herring pie. That's disgusting. I don't even know why that was a thing. She delivers the pie to the grandchild, and she's like, "Oh, why did Grandma and Granny get me this? And why'd she bring this to me? I don't want this." And she gets all snooty and kind of like just throws it to the side, and she signs off for Kiki. You notice how Kiki doesn't say anything in the scene, but we know exactly what she's thinking in her mind, how upset and how sad she is. Not so much that she had to make this delivery, but that she had to see this girl where Kiki had this like really nice bonding experience previously with this older woman who wants to make something for her grandchild. She's so excited. This is all she can focus on. Then to see it just kind of be thrown away. And then Kiki, again, not saying anything. And it maybe in like a Western style kind of film, we would see Kiki go like, "How dare you say that about your grandma," and all this. She doesn't say anything. And I feel like that's just so empowering just as a scene in general, just to know she knows what you're doing, but she's not going to scold you because she just knows how wrong it is. What did you think of that, John? Like, there's a lot of scenes like that in this movie.
No, yeah, 100% agree. I feel like that's how you know sometimes a really good director or a good storyteller is how sometimes they can show emotion through a character without saying words. I feel like it's very empowering through that. Especially in this movie, I feel like when she's silent, you can still tell a lot throughout the whole movie. Mm-hmm. Like, just what she's going through.
Right, I think so. And then, like, Adam, I know there's another scene where Tombo's waiting in the rain for Kiki to come home, and we really never get to hear him say anything. We just kind of see him, like, standing there waiting, and he kind of just, eventually he just puts the umbrella away and walks away, and then we see him walking away, and Kiki's just, like, so devastated, but she doesn't say anything. She kind of just, like, runs up to her room, and that's kind of the end of it. I just really like what Miyazaki's able to do there. Just he's able to show these characters without dialogue. Do you think that helps transcend some of the barrier that someone might have to entry to these films?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like, I mean, it's something that we preach on here. Like, show, don't tell. Like, this is just, like, the language barrier. Even if you don't, speak Japanese or understand Japanese, like, or if we were to watch the sub or something like that, I could understand what he's feeling.
Yeah.
Like, even just by the way that I can see his emotions and, his face reactions, all that kind of stuff. And that's throughout the movie.
Right. And again, I think that's even interesting too. Like, again, he's able to do this with the camera. And like we kind of said earlier, he takes a fantastical element such as Kiki being a witch and makes that second. Right? It really doesn't feel like that's kind of the crux of the story. Like, no one really makes a big deal about it, which I think is kind of funny throughout the whole movie. Like, oh, she's a witch. Oh, she's flying. Like, they kind of like bat an eye here and there when she's flying in the air. But for the most part, everyone's pretty well, receptive of her being a witch and flying around. But I like how he's able to do that. It's just not a big deal in this movie. And Julie, for someone, we've seen this a lot in media where we have like the witches, or it's always like the supernatural elements, always the core crux of the story. Like the witch will cast a spell on someone, or there'll be some kind of magical involvement. That's not this story whatsoever. It has really nothing to do with the story, the fantastical element. There's no magic really involved with anything besides the flying. I think that's a nice change of pace and maybe something more restraint than we would get here with Western animation.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's just a coming of age tale with a character who just happens to be a witch. Like you said, it does take that back seat to the overall story. And I just like that the character, in other movies, they'd be like, "Oh my God, you're a witch," and be freaking out. But it's just like, "Oh, you're a witch? Okay, cool." And then she uses that not to cast spells or to harm people, but to help people. And, in that respect, that's what helps her grow as a character, is through, service to others. But then at the end also, realizing that she needs to help herself, grow. So
right. And I do love
really
this
nice
movie. I think it really does a great job with things like that. One of my issues I think I do have with this movie, again, it's kind of like I had with Totoro. I think it's a little worse here to some extent, where the movie kind of just ends. At one point, Kiki saves Tombo from the exploding, the Hindenburg almost, essentially at that point, saves him, and they're like, "Oh, movie's over, bye," and it kind of just ends at that point. But there's also some other interesting things that bothered me, and I didn't really know this until I looked it up, so I don't know how I would have known this otherwise. Throughout the movie, Gigi's kind of there with Kiki, who John hates. I'm going to keep bringing that up because I think that's hilarious. Gigi's kind of there, and he's, you know, with Kiki kind of helping her on her journey, almost kind of being her conscience, but being kind of like her guide, almost like a Jiminy Cricket to her Pinocchio, maybe to a degree. But at the end of the movie, Gigi just suddenly stops talking, which I think is very interesting. And I always wonder, like, well, why can't she hear him anymore? Because there's a point prior to this where Kiki loses her magic. She's unable to fly, which that's a whole nother, I'm sure, discussion we could have just on what the symbolism is of that and everything. And by the end of the movie, she's able to fly again. And she saves Tombo and the movie pretty much ends, but she's unable to talk to Gigi. The reason why, I guess, apparently is when a witch hits a certain level of maturity, they're unable to speak to their cat. That's why, like, the mother isn't able to talk to Gigi. None of the adults are able to. That's never explained really in the movie. And I feel like unless you were kind of wondering like I was, I never would have known that. Adam, did you have any idea like that was kind of like what they were going for with the story there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can kind of get that vibe. Like, especially from watching Totoro, it's like, once again, the children innocence.
Right.
Like, it's just basically Gigi's more of a guide, I guess, into, you know, I guess
adulthood,
just in case
right?
anything was to happen. But once they hit that certain, like, okay, you've had these life events, you know how to react to them now. Here's your, you know, entry into adulthood.
And it's interesting because for such a simple movie, I just feel like it could have been better explained, I guess, is really. There should have been some kind of way to convey that a little bit better to the audience, because there is some interesting witch lore, which, again, I know it's not the focus of the movie, but sometimes when you introduce these kind of elements that make the audience curious, it's a good way to, you need to explain them just a little bit more sometimes.
It is interesting though, like when it happens, because I think it happens around the time she gets sick, right? So like after she has that bad experience with delivering to the granddaughter, who's very bitter about the gift itself, and then, you know, traveling through the rain, missing her date with Tombo, getting sick. So she kind of has that little bit of like bitterness and resentment, and sees kind of like the negativity in the world, where I guess that before it never really impacted her, but that, like, just seeing how mean someone could be towards like a gift.
Right.
I think that really hit Kiki, and that kind of like started to push her out of that innocence and more into, you know, maturity and adulthood, realizing that not everybody's going to be kind and appreciative. So to see like that's kind of what triggered the separation between her and Gigi, that, you know.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Move forward.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that's incredibly interesting that they kind of go that direction. But again, I just maybe wish they explained it a little bit more. John, I know you had some issues with Gigi there, but did you have any other issues with the movie that you weren't liking? Were there any other kind of problems with it?
No, I felt like the rest of it was pretty decent.
Pretty decent.
I thought maybe it moved a little bit slow, per se, for me.
Yeah, I guess you can make the argument it was a little bit slow at times. There were definitely some kind of felt like it was spinning its wheels a little bit here and there. Did you think it had the same issue with like Totoro's ending, where just the movie just kind of ended and then you were given like scenes of kind of what happened afterward? Did you not like that approach again?
Yeah, I didn't care for that per se.
Okay.
But I did think like what you guys were just talking about is very interesting, like how it does seem like in a lot of movies, a lot of children's movies, where children are able to communicate with something, but you just kind of know that adults can't understand like the animal. Like I feel like in certain movies, it's always like there's a pet that's talking to the child, but like you just know like the adults can't understand what the pet's saying, but the child can. So it's kind of like always an interesting thing.
Yeah, it is kind of pretty much like a fairy tale, you know, animated trope at this point, where like, you know, the young protagonist can talk to somebody that, you know, the adults can't hear. And again, Miyazaki does it well. It's just, I guess within the context of it stopping was really my problem with it. Not so much that it was in the movie. But again, I think Kiki is a really, really great movie. I think it really is an excellent coming of age story. And I think we're at that point where we're going to give our final scores. I'm going to give Kiki's Delivery Service a 9.3 out of 10.
Hi. My name's Kiki, and I'm a witch. And this is Gigi. He's my black cat. And we'd be honored if we could live here. Your city is so amazing, and what a beautiful clock tower.
Oh, really? That's very nice, dear. Bye.
I think this is a really good movie. My only issues, again, I think with it is just the continuing of the ending, where it's just the movie kind of just ends, and I think I did want a lot more, especially because we had this build up to where Kiki rescues Tombo, and, I wanted something a little bit more, but I can't argue with the overall quality of the storytelling here. This is some of the best animation, once again, from Studio Ghibli, especially in this late 80s period that we're seeing, where he's able to express characters with not just the vocal performances, but with the visuals. This movie is a beautiful movie to look at. Is it the best Studio Ghibli movie? No, but it's incredibly well done, and I think I see why it resonates with a lot of people, especially a younger female audience. I could definitely see why they find themselves so attracted to the Kiki character and what she goes through as far as her traveling into adulthood. It's interesting that in Brave, I think that Miyazaki was able to take a step back and put magic in the background and put storytelling to the forefront, which I think that's what makes Kiki's Delivery Service pretty much a classic. Adam, how about you? What do you think?
Okay, so I've been going back and forth with this one, but I think I'm going to give it a 9.2.
Gigi, if nobody comes in, I'm gonna have to eat pancakes forever and be fat! And what am I supposed to do about that?
Well, I like pancakes, provided they're not burned.
Look, Furball, when you get as fat and round as a pancake, you see if I care.
I think the ending was pretty much the thing that really bothered me the most too. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, I think tackling those issues with like being overworked or stress or balancing your life, it's definitely something that should be tackled, I guess, more often, and it's very nice to see it in this kind of package. So it's definitely worth a watch.
Right, and it's nice how it can relate to like that young coming of age teenager, because Kiki's 13 in this movie. So it's kind of like when that starts to happen, where you start to find a balance in your life, and even as an adult, it's really hard to find a balance. And I think it's very interesting that Miyazaki tackled this subject. If maybe he was going through it to some extent too. Being an animator, I can assume can't be easy. So I could definitely see a correlation between what you want to do and who you want to be around. I think there's definitely some really interesting things to explore there for sure. So John, how about you? What do you think?
I give this 7.5.
Huh. Pardon me, Miss Snooty Cat.
I felt like it's not as good as Totoro, but I felt like it was a solid performance. It's a solid movie. The cat was annoying, but the rest of it was well done.
If we didn't lose anybody before, we definitely lost them now.
I also like the color palette in this.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think the animation. If there's anything we can't disagree about, it's the animation, I think, with Studio Ghibli films. And Kiki, again, continues that tradition of Totoro looking amazing. It just gets better, which is even interesting, because at first I'm like, I can't get any better than this. And then I see the next movie and it looks even more beautiful. It's just that hand-drawn animation. It's such a quality that, I wish we still had today, because, man, it's really that great. Julie, how about you? What do you think of Kiki's?
I am going to be giving Kiki's Delivery Service a 9.6 out of 10.
Kiki, how high do you intend to go?
This is my first job, and I do not want to be stopped by that traffic cop.
Well, don't look now, but that's an airplane flying under us.
This was at one point my favorite Studio Ghibli movie. I can say it probably isn't, but it's still in that top tier for me. I love Kiki. I love the journey that she goes on. I love her relationship with Gigi, who is very funny and a beloved character. The animation is beautiful and warm and cozy. The ending climax, though, I even told Kevin I knew it was coming, and I feel like that was something that like nagged at me even like when I first watched it. I'm like, I don't care about this stupid blimp. I really do not care about it, and it makes the ending so rushed. And like it's just very a stark contrast for the whole movie, which is kind of like obviously a little bit bigger than Totoro, but it still has those quaint elements. And then also you have this giant blimp set piece. I feel like just kind of seems out of place. But 9.6 is where I'm going to stand firm at.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I think we're going to see that in the next film that we review. That I wonder if Miyazaki was feeling some pressure to kind of have these big like set pieces in his movies to kind of balance them out. Like he showed he could do like the quaint quiet in Totoro, and then Kiki, I don't know if he wanted to necessarily stay the same direction the whole time because, you know, the audience, they were chomping at the bit for something a little more exciting, and whether or not it's to the benefit or detriment of the film, I think there's, you know, a discussion to be made. But I think the action scene is something that we're going to see come up, especially in the next movie we'll be talking about. But thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin. That's Adam, Julie, John. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. We'll catch you next time.
If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys, you should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.